Hello, everyone. Welcome to this AI in Venture event. We're so excited to have you all here. My name is Mirto Lalikos. I'm a principal at VC Lab. And at VC Lab, we run the world's flagship uh, accelerator for venture capital firms worldwide. So we're at a stage right now where we're launching over 60% of the new kind of funds emerging worldwide, which is crazy to think about it. And we do all of this under the Decel Group umbrella. And Decel Group's mission is to democratize access to venture capital. And we do this through a range of kind of activities, programs being one of them, but also tools that leverage a lot of AI that help new and emerging managers get a fund off the ground a lot easier than it used to be. It streamlines a lot of those operations. We have a fund of funds that invests in new and emerging managers called Decel Capital. And we have the program side, which is kind of the VC lab. So if you are in the audience today and you are kind of launching a fund, then we want to let you know that we have applications open for cohort 18. So we've done 18 programs to date. It's crazy. We accelerate thousands of new and emerging managers per year. So if that's you, we're going to put the link down in the chat. You guys can kind of fill in an application there. We do get a lot of demand, so the sooner you can get your application in, the better. But yeah, we also have programs for those of you interested in starting a career in venture capital called Venture Institute. So if you're just kind of looking for a career change or just to learn more about VC, not necessarily launch your own fund, we have Venture Institute. We'll put a link to the chat to that as well. And lastly, for those of you who may be exploring the concept of investing in venture capital as a limited partner, we also have LP Institute, and we kind of run programs to get individuals and institutional investors kind of ready and to invest in venture capital. So with that, I'd love to kind of jump into today's session. Before I do, however, I do need to read this out. So the content presented today is not directed to any investors or potential investors, does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any securities. And with that out of the way, everyone, there's a very large group of you today. So we do want to make this interactive, right? So you'll see that there is a chat section of Zoom, but there's also a Q&A section. So use the chat to kind of introduce yourselves to each other. Use the Q&A to filter in your questions that you have for the panel. We'll be keeping an eye out on the chat, and I want to make sure that we ask as many of your questions as possible. So if you have any questions for our panel today, please put them in the chat. So with that, let's turn it over to today's session. So this is the AI and the future of venture capital session that we're running today. And we have two heavy hitters in both AI and venture capital with us today, Rachel Chalmers, from Generationship, and Ed Dua from IASV. So welcome, Rachel, welcome, Ed. We are so happy to have you here. And maybe we can start off with a bit of a round of introductions. I'd love to kind of for everyone to hear, a little bit about your backgrounds and what you're up to today. And maybe we can start with you, Rachel.
Okay. I'm actually a failed English professor. I was doing my graduate work in Ireland at Trinity College Dublin when I picked up a copy of Wired magazine and thought, oh, I'm not going to be an English professor after all. I'm going to go to San Francisco and write about this .com thing that's happening, which I did. I first got here as an international correspondent. Then I helped start an industry analyst firm with a bunch of my friends called 451. Ended up selling that to Standard & Poor. I got to be the first analyst in the world to cover companies like VMware and Cloudera and Splunk and Chef. Got myself a reputation as a unicorn hunter. One of the firms that had invested in Splunk brought me on as a principal, and that was my introduction to venture. Managed to bag a few unicorns as an investor as well. I was early money into Docker and Aviatrix and launched Darkly. Two of those companies, if you know them, were founded by incredible women engineers, as was VMware. After knocking around a few other firms, I met up with Michelle Yee, who was the lead engineer on the version of IBM Watson that won Jeopardy. She's just a spectacular person. The Vienna Philharmonic tried to poach her from me last year, but Michelle and I started talking and we've never stopped. She had also tried to raise money as a woman engineer and had found it very challenging, particularly at seed stage. So Michelle and I put together a fund called Generationship. Generationship. We're writing very early checks into technical women who are building the infrastructure around this new generation of AI applications. That's us.
Amazing. Ed, over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. And excited to share some knowledge here. My name is Ed Duay, and I've done a range of things, starting off as a coder for about a decade, and doing a number of things, primarily in the investment area. But I have run as a CEO of both a consumer products company and also a software company. So about a little over a decade ago, I elected to aggressively spend close to full time investing in early stage companies, utilizing my own money, and have invested in well over 100 companies and have been very lucky and very successful in terms of taking 5 seed companies to IPO, as well as a bunch of other early stage, primarily software companies, where there were various exits or sold stock on secondaries. Um, about 3 years ago, I got a bunch of high net worth folks together, and we put up more of a formal fund. We were just investing our own money, and we fully invested that last year. And now we're doing more of a traditional early stage seed, deep tech, robotics, health tech, and basically AI software companies. So very excited about that. Enjoying. I love this stuff. This is the most incredible time to be investing right now, and love VC Lab as a plug for you guys. They've been incredibly supportive, and we're really. I love getting up in the morning and just looking at new technologies all day. So myself and my partners, who are deep tech area, both in space tech and health tech. And also robotics. We're really excited to invest in this new era.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. So obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about AI, as is the world talking a lot about AI for a few years now. And it's obviously a space that's, kind of evolving so quickly. So maybe we can just start off with, what is the latest on AI right now? Like, where are we at? What's the latest trends? What are people excited about? And happy for either one of you guys to go first.
Rachel, why don't you start off?
I knew you were going to say that. So DeepSeek was seismic at the beginning of this year, demonstrating that now that we've spent billions of dollars training large language models, competitors don't have to make that upfront capital investment. The results can be replicated on commodity hardware at a fraction of the cost. And that's an incredibly exciting sort of democratization of this technology. So that the ramifications of that have been spreading through the industry. In my particular segment, which is infrastructure and dev tools, people are paying a lot of attention to that, but they're also starting to really implement the potential of these transformer models to simplify and make more powerful the software platform that underlies what will be a new generation of LLM-centered applications. So it's a kind of dog fooding motion where we have to rebuild these software platforms that we've been building since the dot-com era, because LLMs are very different technically from the microservices that we've been architecting for 25 years. But we also have this powerful new technology in order to do that, which are the LLMs. So we're seeing things like agents spawning to manage Kubernetes clusters. We're looking at technologies coming out of the autonomous driving world, where you, instead of simply testing a piece of software one time, you run evaluation. So you run 10,000 simulations of a piece of software, and then you look at the edge cases, because these are non-deterministic systems, and they'll behave differently with the same input. So that kind of evaluation software, which was developed in the autonomous driving world, pertains directly to agentic systems. We're seeing those kinds of systems being built. We're seeing the revival of techniques like paravirtualization to address GPUs, which don't have hardware acceleration for virtualization. All of those technologies, which are very deep, nerdy, infrastructure layer technologies, are suddenly very exciting again, and revived by both the need to underpin these very powerful, very centralized systems, and also the potential of the transformer technologies to change and improve the way we do all of that management.
Ed?
So for us, I mean, we are really software driven, and with AI, since we invest so early stage, just every company is really centered around AI, built up from AI. I mean, there's an enormous potential really for disrupting existing industries with new companies and just a broad range of verticals. So what really excites me is like we really kind of focus in certain areas. Like we don't necessarily do tools or LLM, language models, things like that, just because there's so much leapfrogging that's occurring in that area. What we'd love to do is we really focus on verticals in terms of just little slices where a company will come in and they will invest in an area and they'll build out that slice. And so what I love to do is I love to give examples of areas that we focus on, just to kind of give you an idea of what we like to do. So there's a company called Angstrom AI. Angstrom AI is a very unique company, a startup, some very smart folks out of Cambridge who are basically they're looking at the wet lab in terms of drug development. With all AI, there's going to be an enormous number of drugs that are going to be ready and need to go through the FDA process. The problem is the FDA process is 7 to 10 years. So we looked at Angstrom AI and we invested in Angstrom AI basically as a way of taking all the work that's being done physically in a wet lab and put that in silico within the computer itself to reduce cost, but also to reduce the time. So if you look at this FDA process of 7 to 10 years, there's all these various slices along the way that can be that startups can come in and they can find ways of reducing this process. So Angstrom will come in, they're starting in the wet lab area, then they'll expand out as they build this vertical. And there's thousands of these verticals that are up for grabs. And that's what's the most exciting thing that we really focus on. So again, software driven, not therapeutics in terms of the drug discovery, but software driven ways in which to reduce that FDA process. So that's one example of the types of things we look at.
I love that so much. I want to filter in a question from Marie here that's come into the Q&A. What do you think of the state of AI infrastructure, from powering data centers with nuclear reactors to OpenAI pivoting away from Microsoft and creating their own data centers?
That is a huge question. Can we take
Yeah.
a whole hour to talk about this? I want to shout out to my friend Kate Crawford's excellent book, The Atlas of AI, which actually hit bookshelves before LLMs, but really is literally a journey through the physical underpinnings that are required to support these computing systems, including not only energy, but rare earths, water, and the human resources, the invisible human resources that support modern scale-out planetary systems. These things, we treat them as if they're virtual, but they do have a tremendous concrete footprint in the communities where the data centers are supported, which raises all kinds of issues of social and economic justice as well as environmental justice. I am interestingly not anti-nuclear, although I am of the generation that vividly remembers Chernobyl as well as Fukushima. I know that nuclear power is statistically enormously safer than coal and gas burning power plants. So despite it being 3 Mile Island and intrinsically kind of scary, I'm actually encouraged by the revival of interest in nuclear. I also have friends who work on fusion at Commonwealth and the new European fusion plant. So that's probably not going to happen in our lifetime, but when fusion does happen, it will transform the economy with effectively limitless cheap energy. So we're definitely paying attention to that. One of the really exciting innovations of DeepSeek was that it's producing comparable results to the traditional large language models with a fraction of the power and resource consumption. I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that physical, real world complement, necessary resource usage of AI as we're thinking about how AI will be used and deployed in the world. I think it's a great question. There's no easy answers. I still angel invest in a lot of energy companies because energy is the other big story that's going to transform our world in the next 10 years. That's not perhaps getting as much attention or excitement as AI, but is the obverse of the coin. It's the two need to develop together. Ed?
So I'll just add just to that was great. I'll just add a couple quick things. I think in my view, the energy requirements and the data center requirements are just going to increase dramatically, and they're going to exceed expectations. And a lot of people are worried now that a lot of these companies are going to be cutting back. I don't think that is the case. You might have a short lull, but even with more efficient algorithms like DeepSeek, it's still the need, and with agents that are buzzing around in the background all night long for doing all range of tasks and talking to one another, there's going to be a need. The energy is an issue. I think nuclear is important, especially now there's so many different safer, and I think very safe options out there. And then there's going to be a lot of transition. Energy companies like Bloom Energy, which has a basically hydrogen-based device which will create energy on site. And this is a great short-term, in effect, band-aid that will bridge us to solar and nuclear down the road. So I just think that energy is going to be key, and it's going to be very exciting to see the energy costs drop dramatically over the next decade.
There's a question here from Mike too that I want to kind of float on top here. He's asking, do you see vertical AI as the industrialization of AI? And then kind of goes on to say, do you also see this area as having the potential for quicker exits given kind of the B2B SaaS businesses, or PE firms will need to buy some of these vertical AI businesses?
So I'll take that. I mean, obviously, from my previous question, that's an area that we're focused on very deeply, and actually, kind of, I'll call it kind of real businesses, but real businesses that maybe never could exist in the past. I see that as the huge potential. Again, I'm very concerned about pure AI as it relates. Not that we don't look at these companies, but the leapfrogging that's occurring in these companies, where I would rather we invest in software companies that really build on top of these large language models, and these other types of tools. So I think the vertical area is, yes. I think the exits potentially could be shorter, and that is one of the reasons why we do focus on that as well.
We stay away from vertical AI companies, not because we don't think they're great markets, but because we don't have Ed's experience. We've both worked exclusively in the software world, and we know enough to stick to what we know. Ed is investing on companies built on top of large language models. We're sort of investing in companies that sit underneath and underpin and sometimes use large language models to do that, but around AI on the other side. And that's because I think Silicon Valley has a terrible habit of parachuting in technocrats to other fields with their own deep domain knowledge and regulations written in worker blood, and saying, oh, we can fix it with software. I think that tendency has been exaggerated with AI. And I think for all the power of this technology, it behooves us to be humble in the face of a lot of human expertise and wisdom that is not even online. So it's not incorporated into the language models, particularly in areas like ag tech, geophysics, even human resources tech, trying to automate too much of what is fundamentally human experience has led to massive problems in all the years leading up to AI. AI is not going to fix that problem. And you know, there are wonderful vertical companies that are built by domain experts. One of the exciting things about AI is that instead of technocrats from the valley flying in and saying we can fix legal software, it's now possible for lawyers themselves to say, I have this problem, software people haven't fixed it for me, but I can use prompt engineering to start building prototypes for myself. And those kinds of organically grown companies that come out of the domain themselves, they, I think, have much more to offer than a papered over technical solution from a couple of kids out of Stanford who have never been to a farm.
Yeah,
With all
yeah.
respect, some of my best friends are kids from Stanford.
Um, we have a question here, a follow-up for you, Ed. Someone's asking, when you say the exit could be faster, could you elaborate why do you think this is going to happen? Is it a market uh, consolidation play or something else?
Well, again, I love to give examples if that's okay. So we just made our first investment out of Fund 2 called Talos Robotics. It is a company that's not focusing on the hardware, they're focusing on the software, and they're really focusing on a platform. So what Talos does is they have taken a robotic dog, and they're building a platform on top of it, which basically is going to help seeing impaired individuals. So you look at this opportunity in the near term is like, well, that's pretty cool. You know, there's right now it costs $80,000 to train a seeing eye dog. Okay, so now you're going to have a basically robotic dog to help. But really, the value of this whole thing is that they are going to be creating this platform of autonomy, of AI, of the dog creating a bunch of sensor data, plus the interaction between the dog and the seeing impaired person to create this incredible data lake. Now, this is a big swing, which is what all of our company and all of our investments are. But I see along the way that there's going to be acquisition opportunities for this company as they build this platform over time. So that's their first application, and then they can spin off into other applications. But I also think a lot of people will take note, and I think this could be a potentially short-term exit, or it could be long-term if they really build it, a very large company.
Thank you. Adam is asking, and let me know if either of you want to take this. What's your position on neuromorphic silicon designs? RISC-V, is that how you pronounce it? RISC-V. I'm not going to pretend to know what this is. And the criticality of sustainability open source infrastructure platforms.
I'll jump on the open source part. Sharing code is one of the huge unacknowledged accelerants of our entire industry. You know, it's no accident that the dot-com era and the creation of wealth there coincided with the first real flowering of open source, or that all of the big FANG companies have built their software stacks primarily on open source. You know, Amazon was one of the early adopters of Zen virtualization. Meta is pumping out all of the dev infra stack that it builds as open source gifts back to the community. I think open source, beyond just the economics of being able to grab this software and use it and to be able to modify it and return diffs back to the community, is underappreciated for how it educates coders. You know, the other thing that's happened in the last 20 years is this tremendous democratization of programming, which has come out of the computer science departments and arcane languages and become something that you can just hack on in the evening. And if you don't understand how something works, you ping the Discord, and the maintainer will explain to you what it is you don't understand. I think open source is an incredible cultural contribution to the infrastructure of our society, and that it should be appreciated more. On the neurosymbolic silicon, the neuro-imitative silicon, I don't know enough about it. Michelle gets really excited about this stuff. I say bring it. LLMs only mimic the structure of a human brain in one very specific way of, mapping the tokens and guessing what is the most likely next token to arise given a corpus of written information. It's one very narrow capability compared to all of the capabilities of a plastic human brain. Michelle and I are very interested in all of the alternatives or the complements to LLMs that bring many other kinds of reasoning and symbolic manipulation to the realm of computing.
So yeah, I'm not gonna comment in terms of about that. So and I'll just add on to the open sources. This is just something that is just so well accepted, and it's something we looking at the various software engineers in terms of how active they are in providing open source and how much people are using their open source code. I think that's a really important area. Yeah, so that will be my answer. I'm not going to touch the other area, the other question.
Yeah, yeah. So we had for everyone here, we had a list of questions that we sent out to the panel, but your questions are amazing. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to kind of keep rolling with these
Sure.
questions here. Yeah, they're great. So Ahmed's asking you, Ed, you mentioned that the FDA process for approving new drugs takes around 10 years. How will AI specifically help speed up that process, and what companies are working on such projects at the moment?
Okay, well, I mentioned the Angstrom AI one. The other one, other companies we've been looking at, although we haven't found one we liked, is a way of identifying candidates for drug discovery. If you look at the process right now, when someone has, when a drug company who's going through testing has to get a bunch of people to do a drug test, they have to go through, there's like 100 different questions. This person can't have any liver issues. This person can't have diabetes. This person can't have any whatever. And so it's all done by hand right now, all done on paper for the most part. I mean, yes, there's a computer involved. And AI is just an obvious solution for something like this, where you can just look at the data and just take the piles of information on individuals and pump out quickly, which would have taken, weeks, if not months in the past to do. You can do it in a matter of minutes. So I think that's another one of these slices. How many other slices are there? There's probably another 20 slices within this whole FDA process of how to condense it. Some people are projecting that you're going to get a drug candidate and it's going to go through FDA approval in less than, say, a month. And that's in the future for sure. But there's a lot of opportunity just in that one slice. I mean, this is just one little slice of what AI can do, the FDA process. And just think about all the other areas of deep tech that are available for AI to really conquer and improve life for everybody.
Grace is asking, she's saying robust data security is super important in AI adoption in healthcare. What infrastructure are you seeing being implemented to kind of accelerate the adoption of AI and robotics in the healthcare space?
Not enough yet, frustratingly, and one of the challenges of investing in infrastructure is that building out infrastructure takes time. Like doing early stage seed and great infrastructure ideas is a ton of fun, but actually implementing particularly standards is just intrinsically slow. And AI is not going to necessarily speed that up, because what's hard about standards is just what the IETF used to say. It's like getting people in a room and arguing about things and weighting different people's preferred outcomes and arriving at a compromise that sort of irks everybody but is minimally acceptable to everybody. That's just really hard. That's just like basic politics and game theory and humans negotiating over limited resources. That's going to need to happen in healthcare, particularly around issues like patient privacy, the security of personally identifying information, and critically patient safety, as well as ingesting the results of various experiments and releasing them back to the benefit of the entire community. Obviously, the geopolitical situation, and particularly the situation in the US, is a little hazy with regards to that kind of standard setting, at least for the next 3 years. So that's going to be another obstacle. I think, honestly, that's going to be a gating factor for the adoption of AI in healthcare. People are going to run some of these experiments anyway, but in the absence of strong regulation to protect the patients participating in some of the experiments, I am concerned that there will be accidents and negative PR fallout, and that will then lead to a wave of more draconian legislation to protect people, which will be worse for industry than it would have been if we'd actually managed to get together and agree on some basic ground rules before we deployed the stuff. So a little bit of a pessimistic answer there, just because there's a lack of leadership on the regulatory side.
There is a lot of need on this side, and as you've stated, and I think it's in its infant stage. Rachel, it's something that is desperately needed, and an opportunity too for companies in terms of security. You know, a lot of the health tech companies are really focused on this and building their own data sets, in effect, and protecting them. Very key. You don't want things like 23andMe to occur in this. It really gives a it's a bad sign for the industry. So there's going to be a need for governmental regulations. Hopefully they're not crazy, and so it doesn't impede development. But security is so essential in this area, especially in healthcare.
Thank you so much. Grace kind of touched on robotics there, and there's a lot of kind of chatter around humanoid robotics and in AI right now. There's whispers that, you know, government already kind of placing contracts with startups who are developing these technologies. Where are we at with humanoid robotics and AI? How soon are they going to be kind of super widespread and kind of widely used?
I mean, I'll take this, Rachel. That's okay to start. I think they're going to be very good for very specific applications, like in military and in, you know, reconnaissance and things like that. But I do not see, they're very, very complex. I do not see a robot in your home for another 20 years. It's going to take a long time for a number of reasons. I mean, the software I think will develop very quickly. I think it's the hardware which is going to take a while really to develop. It's very heavy. It's very expensive. And you also have China, China is just so far more advanced in terms of you know, development of these products. You know, when I in the Thales Robotics example I gave earlier, you know, their robotic dog is a Chinese company, and this was, you know, we co-invested with A16Z on this company, and they talked extensively about, you know, the potential issues associated with that in terms of sourcing. But for the most part, I think the hardware is going to be the problem. You're going to see it. It's going to definitely be in industry. It's going to be in manufacturing. It's going to be in military. But I do not see it in the home as a physical humanoid robot in the near term.
Humanoid robots feel to me a little bit like colonizing Mars, in that they're an idea that was really, really cool in science fiction, but in the real world, you have to sort of take a step back and say, what's the problem you're trying to solve? You know, Mars colonization is a reaction to climate pressure on Earth. Well, you know, what if we actually fixed the planet that's already terraformed? Similarly with humanoid robots, you know, do you really want a robot looking after grandma, or do you want a job that gives you the flexibility and the downtime so that you can spend more time with grandma and nurses are adequately compensated, and so her care is not an enormous burden? Do you really want humanoid robots in the military, or do you want better diplomacy and better treaties and better relationships between the nations? That's the only thing I'll throw in. One other point about science fiction: Murderbot premieres next week, based on the Martha Wells novel, starring Alexander Skarsgård. My entire queer feminist science fiction community is beside itself with excitement about that premiere.
I love the plug there.
And it also
Greg,
delves into a lot of the ethics around AI.
yeah, Greg here has the most upvoted question. what's your opinion of whether AI infrastructure and tool companies, LLMs, and other will create and capture value, or is it going to play out more like the internet and mobile booms, where you see the infrastructure creating value and app layer AI for startups capturing the value?
This
I
is
think a lot of
an
these.
Ed versus Rachel fight.
Shall I start on this one? Um,
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of your AI companies, your Google, your Amazons, probably less so, but definitely the Elon's XAI, they're going to be. I would kind of the similarity between what a data center is right now, really, and how it's being used. They're going to grow, and there's going to be a huge need for this type of thing. And the models are going to be important, but the models, there's going to be many people creating open source models, such as DeepSeek and things like that. So I see you'll have some mammoth, large, capital intensive companies, which are probably a lot of the incumbents will be the winners in this for the most part. I'm sure there'll be some others like CoreWeave. But really, it's going to be people building on top of that and the software layer that's going to be utilizing that. But it's two different businesses. Again, that's just not an area that it's so capital intensive. And I think a lot of these, I think you're going to have a few big winners and a lot of losers.
Agreed about the models. That's a industry that started out as non-profits and that was enormously capital intensive, and you have to have billions under management to compete in the model space. That said, I kind of disagree with the premise that in the internet and mobile booms, the app layer companies prevailed. I would argue that some of the big winners of the internet and mobile age were Google and Facebook, and I like to see them as sort of, excuse the pun, meta infrastructure companies, because they kind of implement in the real world primitives that existed in Unix. Google is the instantiation of grep, and Facebook is the instantiation of, a little bit gross, but finger. It's being able to treat the world as if it were a computing environment and then perform these operations on it. I think the same thing will be true in the AI boom, and that's why I'm so excited about the infrastructure layer. I think it's like investing in the foundations for houses. All houses are going to be different, but every house needs the foundation pieces on which they're built.
Thank you so much. Ming is asking, what do you think about AI for drug discovery? Do you think it's going to transform the process and accelerate the approval of drugs?
Ed?
Yeah, just to add on before. I mean, so let's talk about. I've talked about the process of going to FDA. On the front end, the number of companies that have been started over the past, say, 2 years utilizing AI to do various ways of identifying drug candidates has exploded, and that's really exciting stuff because you're going to see an incredible advancement in longevity areas like that, where you're going to be able to live your life, a better life, possibly even a little longer life. And these areas are there's, like I said, there's going to be a huge pipeline of drugs that are going to be piling up. How do we get them through? Again, that's something we think about a lot at our firm. So yeah, that's my view on that.
Drug discovery is so exciting. I've got a friend who's been living for 20 years with chronic leukemia. Unbelievable, unthinkable when I was growing up. I'm most excited. I just learned about Trikafta, which is the new treatment for cystic fibrosis, which has taken it from a syndrome that ends your life at 20 or 30 years to cystic fibrosis patients now having a comparable life expectancy to the rest of the population. Unbelievably exciting. At the same time, atoms can behave incredibly differently depending on the chirality of the molecule. So there's really no way to get around drug testing other than doing it in live subjects, whether animal or human. Doing human testing of drugs is incredibly risky. I grew up with thalidomide kids. So there's huge scope for extraordinary advancements. There's also terrible, terrible risk of harm, and this is where I really worry about this vacuum in regulatory leadership. We want to translate these drug discoveries into treatments for chronic illnesses, but we have to do it safely and in a way that doesn't seriously harm the people who are involved in the experimentation.
Let me add just something quickly on that. I agree 100% that you need human testing. However, I think over a period of time, you're going to start plucking out certain areas of that are going to you'll be able to do in the computer. And it's a natural thing and it's an important thing because there is that trade-off between life and death, right? And in some cases, I think the FDA process has gone too far in terms of being too conservative in terms of what has to be done, and that needs to be analyzed. And I'm not looking to throw it away. I'm looking to reinvent it, and I think that's a very important thing. But the need for human trials has got to change dramatically in terms of what aspects of it are actually you're using humans for those trials.
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions now that have come in asking about how you use AI as investors, or how do as investors kind of diligence AI. So I want to get into some of those. So Nazirke is asking, what core criteria do you use to distinguish between an AI startup with a real lasting advantage versus one that's just riding the hype?
A lot of these are goes back to real basic VC due diligence. And I use AI all day long. I mean, I rarely use Google, except maybe to double check and check my answers. And it depends on really what I'm doing. But it is a fantastic tool if I'm, if I'm going about to meet a company and I read their plan, but then I really need to ask some questions. I'll dump their plan into ChatGPT and I'll start asking questions, and it really gets you up to speed on various things. Going deeper into markets, looking for competitors, things like that. Obviously, have to look at the results and make sure there's not a lot of hallucinations. But in things like that in research, you don't have to worry as much about things like that. But when it comes to picking companies, a lot of it comes back to the basics, and most of it is the people. And you have to spend as much time with these people as you possibly can to understand how smart they are. Do they listen? Do they have integrity? A very important element. And the only way you're going to do this is by spending some time with them and then talking to others who know them. Okay. But the basics of it, and also finding companies. Our companies, you're not going to, the tools, I see a million tools coming out. Well, buy this tool and you're going to be able to find these great hidden companies. And we just don't find that. All of our companies, the vast majority of our companies are coming from our partners, from their networks and who they know. And so a lot of elements so that it's really tools to help you do your job better. But the basics of finding companies and determining, it's very subjective and something that is pretty, hasn't really changed too much. The tools are great because it helps you move your life along very quickly. You can do a lot more analysis.
Yeah, I would give a version of exactly the same answer. I live and die by granola. It transcribes all of my meetings now. It's my portable memory. Shout out to all of the AI features in Decile Hub as well. But as far as picking the companies or even surfacing them, this is a craft business. It's a networking business. All of the companies in our portfolio came through my network, Michelle's network, or introductions from people that we know well. That has its own limitations in that it reifies the difficulty of breaking into Silicon Valley. I try really hard to counter that by being very curious and accepting introductions from all kinds of people and looking at companies that I initially think won't be interesting. But back to what the transformer models actually do, they guess what is likely to come next. In venture, we're looking for the outliers, we're looking for the black swans. And so almost by definition, the LLMs can't find what we're looking for. We're looking for the weird stuff. So keep sending me introductions to the weird stuff. I know what I'm looking for when I see it, but until I see it, I don't know.
And it just add on that. I mean, in terms of if we're talking to the VC crowd here, which I think is people who are looking to start it's really looking at your network and how to expand your network and where you are in the world or what you have done in the world in the past and really leverage that. Look what's right in front of you and expand on that. For example, I live in Berkeley, and so my office is right next to Berkeley, UC Berkeley. So I spend several days a week going to events or meeting with people, having coffees, talking to scientists, the like. So that's one of my strengths here in terms of being able to for deal flow from UC Berkeley. So and then other partners are doing other things. So look at the strengths you have and really focus on developing those, so becoming a unique advantage you have in terms of identifying those companies.
Yeah, 1,000%. This is one of the huge advantages of the VC lab model. I called everyone I've worked for in the last 20 years. Like I was calling people I hadn't talked to in 10 years. Some of them invested, they send me deal flow. And what that whole process has made me do is identify the things that I am uniquely equipped for. Not because I'm special, but because I had this very serendipitous life where I got to work with Diane Green before she started VMware. I know what women founders of billion-dollar outcomes look like before they started that company. That's what I bring to venture. That's my unique perspective. And for each of you, as you're putting together the fund, you will find the thing that is your proximity to Berkeley or your connection to women entrepreneurs. And that will be the thesis that will resonate with your investors and get you to the close.
Yeah, this is such good advice. Thank you so much for sharing. Rachel, you mentioned earlier, send me your weird stuff, pitch decks. And there's a question here that really made me chuckle, by venture.do. How are you preparing for hundreds of pages of AI generated pitch decks, data rooms, protections, and being flooded with the generic stuff? Where our jobs in VCs to figure out the details behind the pitch. How can our job be done in this new reality?
It's such a great question. And it's back to my being a failed English professor. You know, I was lucky enough to get a really incredible world class education in media literacy. And that so far has still made it pretty trivial for me to look at a piece of media and determine whether it was created by a human who's incredibly passionate about what they're working on or somebody who just hit the random button and generated some stuff. Like, that signal is so apparent to me in all of the noise that I still do admissions for Alchemist Accelerator. I read like 400 applications every 2 months and I look at all of their pitch decks. And the pattern recognition of like human created by a genuine, authentic person with a real connection to their market versus AI slop is, I mean, it's night and day. It's not a big challenge.
Yeah, just
No,
and then Ed, I'm going to pass over to you. I was speaking
yeah.
to a teacher, and I was like, how do as a teacher deal with kind of assignments coming in and students kind of using ChatGPT for for their essays and whatnot. And she was like, here's how I deal with it. I go up to them and I'm like, was this you or was this ChatGPT? 5 minutes until they break. Same
Very
thing
funny.
with founders. Ed, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I agree. Again, it's like you can really smell it a mile away. I mean, it's oh, those lines are those words are bolded in the sentences. Well, that was definitely it's using it, to I mean, I use it all the day to edit but usually you have to write it out yourself first, right? And then you can use it to enhance. I mean, we use it a lot for investment memos where we take all of our emails, we take the business plan and we throw it in, we say create an investment memo, and then you go through the whole thing. So it's a good time saver, but you have to go through it. And from business plans coming in, in a second whether that is the case. And again it's back to the referrals, right? Who's referred this to me and the screen associated with that. But yeah, so it's obvious when people use it as a crutch.
I mean, it's back to finding your thing, the thing that you're good at. Um, in a world of a cascade of AI slop, your authentic voice, your individual story is going to be your massive competitive advantage. And so, it's not the pitch deck that we're looking at. We're looking for founders. And you don't fast track your way to becoming a founder by producing a highly polished pitch deck. You become a founder by engaging with a customer problem and becoming the world's expert in that problem and championing the people who live that problem. And you can't fake that. You can't shortcut it. That is the real work of talking to other humans and understanding the world from their point of view and figuring out how to streamline their problem a little bit. It's really easy to spot once you know what you're looking for, and there's no other way to do it than to sit with yourself and figure out the thing that you were put on this earth to do.
Exactly.
And
And it kind of,
and
yeah.
the deck, in many cases, the deck is getting shorter and shorter over time. I mean, think about even fundraising. I rarely, we put together a nice deck, but a lot of times they don't even look at the deck. And so with a company, it's an executive summary, and then you go from there. Yes, you want some details sometimes about, competition or whatever, or market if you don't understand it, right? But for the most part, it's the one-on-one individual that you're dealing with. And that's really a pitch deck. It's just like years ago, they used to write 40-page business plans. I mean, what a waste of time. And I think that's been condensing and condensing and condensing over time.
And luckily, again, the VC Lab process is an unbelievable crucible for you to learn what works in a pitch. You know, you'll be refining your own thesis and figuring out what resonates with your investors. And then when you go out and see founders, you're looking for the same thing that your investors were looking for. You know, once you've found your voice and that synchrony, when you see it in founders, it's unmistakable.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I
Agreed.
think, Rachel, it's kind of going back to something you were saying before, that as VCs, you're looking for non-conventional, and AI will give you conventional. And it's really easy to test this. You just kind of go on ChatGPT or whatever other model, and you ask, like, what's the trends? What's the kind of future trends in venture capital going to be? And it'll spit out a bunch of trends that have already been, right? So,
That's what it does. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed for busy work. It's designed for the boring stuff that you don't care about. For the interesting stuff that you do care about, that's the human work that we love doing.
yeah, yeah. Sarah's asking, there's a plethora of AI tools to improve workflows as fund managers. How, and I know you guys touched on this a little bit, how are you incorporating AI into your operations? What are your favorite tools?
I already mentioned Granola. Somebody mentioned Bordy in the chat. Bordy is amazing. I've had some really great connections through it. Michelle does a bunch of cool hacks, things like getting our portfolio companies monthly investor reports, a smooth workflow from that into our Decile Hub generated newsletter. But again, it's like automating the busy work. It's not a lot fancier than doing Perl scripts. Um, I mean, it's much more powerful, but that's the same model.
Yeah, we haven't, other than a lot of the research and things like that, using AI, we use a Notion sheet that all the partners plug into, and we just have very strict rules on how that all works, and it's pretty efficient. And you can use AI to a degree on it, but for the most part, it's spending the time going through, and we meet twice a week for an hour, all our partners, and we talk through all these companies and decide where we are with them, whether we're going to reach out to them and have discussions. But the tools are nice. I mean, Ocean's great, and it continues to expand in terms of its functionality. And it's something we've used in the past. So we're not changing our software like when we see a new shiny pebble on the ground, because then you have to train everybody to get up to speed. But AI is going to be important it's going to be an incremental thing in terms as we move forward.
AI is good for taking off all of the work that isn't us sitting and thinking hard and engaging with the market and the founders.
Where AI
Related.
is very good though is like when you're looking for new ideas to understand an area, and if there's a lot of areas where you don't know or you don't know it fully, it can fill in that knowledge gap for you then to think through where it can go. So it is a good tool. It doesn't tell you what the future is, but it can give you the foundation in which then to determine what the future may be.
Yeah, yeah. And related to that, Greg is asking how the panel sees the role of AI in operations in VC in your firms, like scorecarding, weighted evaluation metrics, et cetera. And will AI affect the percentage?
Rachel? Or I'll
I'm a
go if you
part-time
like.
partner with HeavyBit, and they have one of the best operations teams I've worked with at any fund. Um, it's easy to overlook operations and think that that's just busy work, but there's so much subtlety that goes into things like negotiating the fine details of a term sheet and to like normalizing the accounting across portfolio companies so that you can present a clean statement to the LPs. Um, it's not that there are jobs within companies that are mindless and therefore easy to automate. It's that for every role within a company, there's a large number of tasks which are mindless and which would be better taken off that individual. So the individual can double down on the parts of their work that require nuance and domain knowledge and subtlety and intelligence. So I don't I think a better model to think about separating automations from separating operations from the structure of VC is Decile itself. You know, it would have been much more difficult for the two of us to raise a fund without the support of Decile and the fractional legal and accounting that we get through that partnership. But it's a partnership between humans. We all use a lot of tools to make us better at our work, but the fundamental division of responsibility is between adult humans who are constantly negotiating about that relationship.
Yeah, I'll add to the VC unpaid plug is that I want to spend money fundraising and investing. Okay, and everything else I mean I need to watch it, but I don't care about. I mean I want this to be done. So with VC Lab and Decile Group, it's we have a point person she's fantastic and very responsive, and Decile Group's continually improving, and they want to continue to improve. So I want to focus. It's like any business when you talk to an entrepreneur. It's like, what is your focus? Should you be focusing on, and what should you outsource? And the operational aspects of things, although you obviously need to watch it, is not where you should be spending most of your time. Most of your time should be spending on fundraising and investing, and that is the beauty of Visa Lab.
Thank you so much for that. It's such a pleasure to be working with you guys, really. So, yeah, I will pass on your compliments to the team. We're reaching the top of the hour. Is there anything that you guys think we should have covered and didn't, or any kind of final words of advice that you have for everyone here, on how to kind of navigate AI and venture capital?
I haven't been in a market this exciting since I first got into the industry back in the early 2000s with the dot-com boom. AI has democratized the means of production in a way that hasn't happened since HTML and CSS. You're seeing like 15, 20 years of people who've been trained at the FANG companies in planetary computing, now leaving to start their own startups. I'm in San Francisco. There are 12 AI related events happening every night that I don't go to because I'm a massive introvert, but I get the advantage of all of those people being in town to go to these events. I don't think there's been a more exciting time to start a venture firm in my career. I feel unbelievably privileged that I got to attend VC Lab and build my fund. I remember that it was really difficult and painful, and there were moments when I thought I wasn't going to be able to make it. So I just want to really encourage you. It's an unbelievably great time in history to be deploying capital. You got into VC Lab, you are the most qualified people. Once you figure out what your unique angle is, the fund will come together and you'll get to play in this incredible playground.
Ditto on all that. Continually to read, and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. There's just so much out there to learn. Go down those rabbit holes, which are fascinating. Talk to people. Again, to mirror what Rachel says, it's the most amazing time, and you're never going to see the opportunities now, both to make a difference in the world with what you invest in, and also making money, is second to none at this point in history. It's very exciting. So, and endurance, stick with it, continue and just keep getting up every day and say, I'm going to do it.
I love this so much. What a wonderful way to kind of wrap this incredibly insightful and kind of positive session. Thank you to you guys. You were tremendous, Rachel and Ed. Everyone in the audience, you guys were fantastic. I absolutely loved your question. And yeah, thank you so much for coming today. This was amazing. See you all soon, hopefully.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.